Forgiveness is not weakness. It is a manifestation of inner strength and maturity. Many people mistakenly believe that forgiving someone who has hurt them means accepting defeat, admitting inferiority, but the truth is quite the opposite. Forgiveness requires a heart strong enough and a mind deep enough to transcend negative emotions. When hurt, the natural human reaction is anger. We want to protect our ego. We want to prove that we are right and the other person is wrong. Resentment sometimes brings temporary satisfaction because we think we are preserving our self-respect. But the longer we hold on to that bitterness, the more exhausted we become. Resentment is like a smoldering fire. It doesn't flare up fiercely every day, but it's enough to burn away inner peace. We may smile on the outside, but inside, we're heavy-hearted. Every time we recall the past, our hearts ache. The repeated anger drains us of a lot of energy. Forgiveness doesn't mean denying the pain. No one is asking you to forget what happened immediately. Forgiveness begins with acknowledging that you were hurt. It's the first step towards maturity. When you dare to confront your true feelings, you are much stronger than when you avoid them. Some people believe that if you forgive, the person who made the mistake will never learn their lesson. But the truth is, forgiveness doesn't erase responsibility. The person who made the mistake is still accountable for their actions. Forgiveness simply means you decide not to let their mistake continue to control your life. To forgive, we must overcome our wounded ego. We must accept that no one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. When we look at things from a broader perspective, we realize that we ourselves have made mistakes and have been forgiven by others. This understanding opens the door to compassion. Forgiveness is a process. Initially, you might just lessen your anger. Then you learn to see things more calmly. And one day, you no longer feel the sting when you think about it. That's a sign of healing. Not because it never happened, but because it no longer controls you. Inner strength is most clearly demonstrated when we have the power to retaliate, but choose to let go. When we could say harsh words, but choose to remain silent. When we could harbor resentment, but decide to free ourselves. These choices are not easy. They require self-control and courage. Maturity isn't about never being hurt. It's about how you handle that hurt. Mature people understand that dwelling on the past won't make the present better. They know that the future needs a lighter heart, not a heart full of unhealed wounds. Forgiveness is also a way of loving ourselves. When we let go of resentment, we allow ourselves peace. We no longer dwell on painful memories. We dedicate our energy to more positive things like self-development, building new relationships, and pursuing our own goals. Some wounds are so deep they can't heal in a day or two. Forgiveness in such cases demonstrates inner strength, because you're not only facing the pain, but also overcoming the feeling of injustice. You accept that life isn't always fair, but you still choose to live positively. When we forgive, we also learn empathy. We understand that behind wrongdoing may lie fear, ignorance, or hurt on the part of others. This doesn't justify the mistake, but it helps us see things from a broader perspective. Empathy opens our hearts. Forgiveness doesn't mean continuing to allow others to hurt you. Maturity also means knowing how to set boundaries. You can forgive, but still choose to keep your distance. You can let go of resentment, but not forget the lesson. It's a combination of tolerance and wisdom. Many people experience a significant sense of relief after forgiving others. They sleep better, their minds are less stressed, and negative thoughts no longer occupy so much of their time. They realize that the burden they've been carrying for so long was actually something they themselves have held on to. Forgiveness also paves the way for new beginnings. The past no longer holds us back. We can step into the future with a different mindset. We no longer carry excessive doubt or the fear of being hurt again. We are more cautious, but not closed off. There are people who once thought they would never forgive, but over time, looking back, they realize the pain is no longer as sharp as before. They have changed. They are stronger. And that strength doesn't come from holding on to resentment, but from daring to let go. Forgiveness is the choice of those strong enough to control their emotions. Instead of letting anger guide their actions, they choose to think things through. Instead of letting the past define them, they choose to write their story with new, more positive chapters. Forgiveness is not weakness. If we are weak, we will easily succumb to resentment. Only with strong inner strength can we calmly say that we are ready to let go. That is the strength of someone who understands their own worth and does not let others dictate their emotional state. Maturity is demonstrated by knowing what to hold on to and what to let go of. Resentment only weighs down the soul. Forgiveness helps us move forward. When we understand this, we no longer see forgiveness as a concession, but as liberation. Life is too short to carry too much anger. Each day is an opportunity to start anew. When we choose forgiveness, we choose to be gentler with ourselves. We allow ourselves peace, to focus on what matters. So, if today you're torn between holding on to resentment or letting go, remember that forgiveness doesn't make you smaller. On the contrary, it shows you're strong enough to move past the pain. It's a clear manifestation of inner strength and maturity. And it is this maturity that will lead you to a more peaceful and profound life. Resentment is like carrying a stone in your heart. At first you think you can bear it. You think that holding on to that anger is a way to remind yourself not to be hurt again? But the longer you hold on, the heavier the stone becomes. It not only weighs down your emotions, but also wearies your soul. When someone hurts us, the natural reaction is pain and anger. That feeling is perfectly normal. It shows that we value the relationship and expect respect in return. But the issue isn't whether we were angry at first, but how long we hold on to that resentment. If we let it linger for too long, it becomes a burden. Resentment makes us remember a word, an action, a moment forever. We repeat that memory in our minds as if rewatching an endlessly sad film. Each time we remember it, our hearts grow heavier. The stone in our hearts doesn't disappear on its own. It grows larger over time. When we harbor resentment, we tend to view everything with suspicion. We find it hard to trust others. We fear being betrayed again. Gradually, we build a wall around ourselves. That wall may provide temporary security, but it also leaves us feeling more alone. Some people think that letting go of resentment means they've lost. But in reality, the loser is the one who lets negative emotions control them for too long. When you hold on to a stone in your heart, the one who suffers the most is yourself. Others may have moved on, but you remain stuck in the past. Resentment also affects health. When the mind is constantly stressed, the body reacts accordingly. We have difficulty sleeping, become irritable, and struggle to concentrate. The small joys of life are no longer fully appreciated because the soul is constantly drawn back to old pain. The longer we hold on to that stone, the heavier it becomes with each step. We may succeed at work, we may laugh and talk with friends, but deep inside, there remains an unresolved darkness. That heaviness silently steals away the lightness we once possessed. It's worth noting that resentment doesn't change the past. What has happened remains. No matter how angry we are, time cannot be turned back. Understanding this, we begin to realize that holding on to resentment only makes the present darker. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting everything. Letting go means accepting that what has happened and that you can't change it. You can learn from it, you can set boundaries for the future. But there's no need to continue hurting yourself by holding on to anger. Forgiveness is like putting the stone down. It can be difficult at first because we're used to carrying it around. But when we try to let go, we feel a sense of relief. Our hearts feel more open to embrace more positive things. Some wounds are very deep, and letting go isn't easy. But no matter how slow it is, each step toward forgiveness helps to lighten the burden. We can start by acknowledging our feelings, and then gradually learn to see things from multiple perspectives. When resentment no longer dominates us, we find ourselves calmer in new situations. We don't overreact, and we don't let negative emotions guide our actions. This serenity is a sign of a lighter heart. Resentment also causes us to miss many opportunities. When we are too focused on the past, we no longer have enough energy to build the future. New relationships can be affected by excessive defensiveness. We limit ourselves because of what has already happened. The longer we hold on to the stone in our hearts, the more we forget joy. We may achieve something good but still feel incomplete because a part of our mind remains bound. When we let go, we allow ourselves to experience happiness more fully. Maturity lies not in never being hurt, but in how we handle that hurt. Mature people understand that holding on to resentment doesn't make them stronger. On the contrary, letting go is a manifestation of inner strength. Everyone has a choice. We can continue carrying the stone in our hearts and walk on with difficulty. Or we can stop, look at it, understand why we hold on to it, and gently put it down. That choice isn't easy, but it determines the quality of our lives. Perhaps the person who hurt us never apologized. Perhaps they never realized their mistake. But our peace of mind shouldn't depend on the actions of others. We deserve to have peace of mind whether they change or not. When we put the stone down, we not only free ourselves, but also open up space for healing. We begin to see life with a gentler perspective. We learn to love ourselves more instead of binding ourselves to the past. Resentment is like carrying a stone in your heart. The longer you hold on to it, the heavier it becomes. But you always have the right to choose to let go. When your heart is lighter, each step you take will be more steady and peaceful. And it is in that relief that you find the peace you deserve. Nelson Mandela's story is a living testament to the power of forgiveness. He spent nearly 3 decades imprisoned in harsh conditions simply for fighting against apartheid in South Africa. 30 years is enough to fuel resentment in anyone. But when he emerged from prison, he chose not revenge. He chose forgiveness. Born in 1918, Mandela grew up in a society deeply divided by apartheid. Black people were deprived of basic civil rights and discriminated against in education, employment, and life. Faced with this injustice, he joined the struggle, becoming one of the prominent leaders of the African National Congress. In 1962, he was arrested and subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment. His years in prison, especially at Robben Island Prison, were a tremendous ordeal. He was forced to do hard labor, lived in cramped cells, and had limited contact with his family. Many of his contemporaries succumbed to despair, but Mandela did not allow his spirit to be imprisoned along with his body. He read, reflected, and strengthened his will. He understood that if he let hatred take over, he would lose himself. Mandela once said that as he walked through the prison gates to freedom, he knew that if he didn't leave the bitterness behind, he would remain imprisoned. That statement reflects a profound truth. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened, but about deciding not to let the past control the future. In 1990, Mandela was released from prison. The image of him raising his fist as he walked out of prison became a symbol of hope. Many expected him to lead a movement for revenge, to overthrow those who had oppressed him. But what he did was different. He called for national reconciliation. He emphasized that if South Africa descended into violence, everyone would lose. In 1994, Mandela became South Africa's first black president in a multiracial democratic election. Instead of removing white people from government, he advocated cooperation. He retained many former officials to ensure stability. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where victims and perpetrators of apartheid could engage in dialogue, confess, and seek forgiveness. That decision was not easy. The pain of millions could not be erased overnight. There were families who lost loved ones, lives that were ruined. But Mandela believed that if hatred continued to be nurtured, the country would never truly be free. He understood that political freedom must be accompanied by freedom of spirit. His tolerance created a historical turning point. The world looked at South Africa with surprise and admiration. A nation once on the brink of civil war had chosen the path of reconciliation. Mandela became a global symbol of compassion and political wisdom. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, not only for his role in ending apartheid, but also for his rare spirit of forgiveness. Forgiveness in Mandela's case was not a sign of weakness. It was the choice of a man strong enough to rise above personal suffering for the common good. He did not deny what he had endured. He did not justify injustice. But he refused to let hatred shape the future of his people. That story reminds us that forgiveness can change not just an individual, but an entire nation. If Mandela had chosen revenge, South Africa might have been plunged into prolonged violence. The transfer of power could have been a bloody purge. But thanks to the spirit of reconciliation, the nation has the opportunity to build a new foundation. Mandela's lessons aren't just for politics. They're relevant to everyone's life. When we're hurt, the natural reaction is to retaliate. But if everyone holds on to resentment, society will be rife with conflict. Forgiveness opens the door to dialogue, understanding, and healing. Mandela's tolerance was also evident in the way he treated his former guards. He invited some of his former jailers to his presidential inauguration. This act sent a powerful message that the past should not be as shackles binding the future. It also showed that he truly believed in what he said about reconciliation. Many believe that only great individuals can forgive to such an extent. In reality, everyone can learn from that spirit within their own sphere. We may not face national-level injustice, but we still experience hurt in our families, at work, and in friendships. Choosing to hold on to resentment or let go is a daily choice. Mandela demonstrated that inner strength lies not in physical power, but in the ability to control emotions. He did not allow his years of imprisonment to make him bitter. On the contrary, he emerged with an open heart. This is what made him a respected leader. Looking back on his life, one thing becomes clear. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it shapes the future. Through his choice of tolerance, Mandela helped write a new chapter for South Africa, chapter of hope instead of revenge, of cooperation instead of division. Nelson Mandela's story reminds us that no matter how harsh the circumstances, people still have the right to choose their attitude. Forgiveness is not a denial of justice, but a search for a path where justice can go hand in hand with peace. His tolerance transformed an entire country and inspired millions around the world. In our own lives, we may not face challenges as great as Mandela's, but whenever we stand before the choice between hatred and forgiveness, let us remember the image of the prisoner walking out of the prison gates with a calm smile. He proved that when we have the courage to let go of resentment, we not only liberate ourselves but also open up a better future for our community. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting everything. It's a choice not to let the past control the present. Many people mistakenly believe that when you forgive, you have to erase the memory, to behave as if the hurt never happened. But that's not true. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It only changes how you carry those memories in your heart. When a wound appears, the first thing we feel is pain. That pain is real. It reflects hurt. It reflects shattered expectations. If we try to deny it or force ourselves to forget it too quickly, the emotion won't disappear. It will only be buried deep. And what is buried deep often finds a way back up when we are at our weakest. Therefore, forgiveness is not about erasing memories. Forgiveness is a journey of confrontation. We look directly at the event, acknowledging that it once hurt us. We don't justify the wrongdoing, nor do we deny our own feelings. But after seeing everything clearly, we choose not to let it continue to control our present. The past is incredibly powerful. Even a single memory can make our hearts ache. A single word that evokes those memories can unsettle us. Until we forgive, we live in a state of defensiveness. We are suspicious, wary, and react more strongly than necessary. Not because the present is so terrifying, but because the past still carries its full influence. Some people enter new relationships, but always carry old fears with them. They don't fully trust. They don't dare to open up completely. What others do in the present is viewed through the lens of past trauma. That's when the past controls the present. Forgiveness is telling yourself that what has happened no longer dictates how you live today. You may remember, but you don't let memories drag you back to the initial painful state. You may learn from your mistakes, but you don't turn those lessons into a wall separating you from the world. This requires maturity, because holding on to resentment is sometimes easier than letting go. When angry, we feel we have a reason to be tough, to protect our ego. But the tighter we hold on, the more exhausted we become. Forgiveness is accepting that we cannot change the past, but we can absolutely choose our attitude for the present. Some people think that forgiving will make them seem weak. In reality, not being controlled by the past requires immense inner strength. We must be calm enough to view things from multiple perspectives. We must be tolerant enough to understand that people can make mistakes. Most importantly, we must love ourselves enough not to continue hurting ourselves further. Forgiveness does not mean continuing to tolerate hurtful behavior. We can forgive, but we must still set clear boundaries. We can let go of resentment, but not of self-respect. Forgiveness is about releasing negative emotions, not abandoning our principles. When the past no longer controls the present, we feel lighter. We no longer react with old habits. We begin to see things with a calmer perspective. Similar situations no longer cause us to panic. We learn to separate what has happened from what is happening now. Some people take years to understand this. They live in prolonged anger, only to realize one day that they have missed too many opportunities for happiness. Not because others continue to hurt them, but because they let old memories dictate their new emotions. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. When we are no longer bound by resentment, We have more energy to build something good. We focus on healthy relationships. We invest time in personal growth. We no longer waste our minds on imaginary conversations with someone who once hurt us. The past can be a valuable lesson, but if we carry it as a burden, it will slow our progress. When we learn to forgive, we turn the past into a foundation instead of shackles. We remember to grow, not to dwell on it. Choosing not to let the past control the present also helps us live more fully. We feel joy more clearly because our minds are not dragged back to painful memories. We dare to trust because we understand that risk is a part of life. We dare to love because we know that even if we are hurt, we are still strong enough to overcome it. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't forgiving others, but forgiving ourselves. We blame ourselves for wrong decisions, for trusting the wrong people, for not protecting ourselves better. But if we keep blaming ourselves, we're letting the past control the present. Forgiving ourselves is a crucial step towards true freedom. Forgiveness doesn't erase memories. It changes the emotions associated with those memories. When we recall them, our hearts no longer ache as before. We see the events as part of our journey of growth. We realize that thanks to those experiences, we understand ourselves and life better. Everyone has the right to choose. We can live in the shadow of the past, or we can step into the light of the present. Forgiveness is the door that leads us out of that shadow. It doesn't open in a day, but small steps will help us get closer to peace. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting everything. It's choosing not to let the past control the present. When we understand this, we no longer fear our memories. We know that we are stronger than what happened. And when the present is guided by awareness instead of resentment, we truly live freely. There were two close friends who had been together since their school days. They grew up together, sharing youthful secrets, overcoming stressful exams and early life challenges together. Their friendship was once so strong that anyone looking at them would believe nothing could ever break it. However, even a small misunderstanding can create a huge gap. It all started with a remark overheard by someone else. A person accidentally heard their friend say something negative about them during a conversation. Without verifying or questioning, they kept the hurt to themselves. Disappointment crept in and gradually replaced the trust they once had. The other person was completely unaware of what was happening. He only sensed the change. Conversations became brief. Replies to messages slowed down, and meetings were canceled due to busy schedules. Silent distance grew between two people who had once been very close. The more silence there is, the wider the gap becomes. The person who is hurt chooses to keep it to themselves. They think that if their friend truly valued the friendship, they wouldn't have said it. The other person thinks that perhaps their friend has changed or has found new, more important relationships. Each person constructs their own narrative in their mind, and both believe they are the one who has been abandoned. As time passed, the beautiful memories were gradually overshadowed by indifference. They still followed each other's lives on social media, still knew what the other was doing, but no longer had the courage to start a frank conversation. Then one day an event occurred. The man who heard the rumor was facing great difficulties at work. He felt lonely and lost. In that moment of weakness, he remembered an old friend who had always listened and offered sincere advice. He suddenly realized that what he had lost was not just a friend, but an important part of his life. After many sleepless nights, he decided to take the initiative and text her. Not to reproach her, not to complain, but simply to check in. The initial message was hesitant but sincere. He wrote that he missed the days when they were close, and if there was any misunderstanding, he hoped to have the opportunity to talk things through. The message surprised the other person. He read it over and over again. He was still deeply saddened by this distance, but his pride made him hesitate. He wondered if he should open up. Then he remembered the years they had spent together. He realized that their friendship was worth more than his ego. They arranged to meet at their usual coffee shop. The atmosphere was initially a little awkward, but when one person started to speak their true feelings, the wall between them gradually crumbled. The hurt person recounted what they had heard and their disappointment at believing their friend had been bad-mouthing them behind their back. The other person fell silent, then explained that the comment had been completely misinterpreted. They had never intended to hurt their friend. At that moment, they both realized that they had let a small misunderstanding ruin something big. The person who initiated the message bowed their head in apology for not trusting enough to ask directly from the beginning. The other person also apologized for not noticing the change and clarifying things sooner. These apologies didn't diminish their relationship. On the contrary, they deepened their friendship. Forgiveness doesn't come instantly with a nod. But when one person opens their heart and the other is willing to listen, forgiveness gradually develops. They understand that everyone makes mistakes, and everyone can be swayed by emotions. The important thing isn't that there's never been a misunderstanding, but that there's the courage to make amends. After that meeting, they not only rekindled their old friendship, but also built a new understanding. They learned that prolonged silence can make small things seem serious. They also understood that genuine communication is essential for friendship to thrive. The story of those two friends illustrates a simple yet profound truth. Many relationships don't break down because of betrayal or deep-seated hatred. They break down because of misunderstandings that go unaddressed and egos that refuse to compromise. Only when someone takes the initiative to apologize, even if they aren't entirely in the wrong, does the door have a chance to open. And only when the other person is willing to forgive can the past be left behind. Proactiveness and tolerance are two essential pieces to saving a relationship. Their friendship later became less carefree than it was at the beginning, but it grew stronger. They had weathered challenges together and understood that what kept them together wasn't the old memories, but the appreciation of the present. In life, each of us can be one of those two people. Sometimes we are the ones who get hurt, and sometimes we unintentionally cause misunderstandings. But if we are brave enough to apologize and open-minded enough to forgive, many precious relationships will not be lost. A sincere apology can melt the ice of silence. Timely forgiveness can salvage years of a relationship. And sometimes the most important thing isn't who's right or wrong, but whether both still want to keep each other in their lives. The story of these two close friends reminds us that misunderstandings can happen at any time, but proactiveness and tolerance will determine the outcome. When one person moves forward and the other doesn't turn their back, the friendship has a chance to be reborn, stronger and deeper than before. Holding on to resentment hurts you more than it hurts others. The other person may have moved on, while you remain stuck. This is a hard truth to accept, but if you look deeply into your own experience, you'll see how painfully true it is. When hurt, the first reaction is often anger. We feel treated unfairly, betrayed, and belittled. That feeling makes our hearts burn, and our minds race with questions of why. In that moment, hatred seems like the only way to protect our self-esteem. But hatred isn't just a fleeting emotion. If we nurture it, it becomes a lasting state. We think about the person who hurt us, imagine the retaliation, and replay the situation in our minds. Each time we remember it, the wound is reopened. The other person may not know what we're thinking, but we're exhausting ourselves. The irony is that the person who hurt us may have moved on with their life. They may be happy, building new relationships, pursuing their own goals. Meanwhile, we remain stuck in the past. We live in the past, and unresolved feelings. Hatred is like an invisible rope, binding us to the person who hurt us. We think we're keeping our distance, but in reality, we're letting them occupy our minds. The angrier we get, the more we think about them. And in doing so, we give them more power than necessary. Holding on to resentment also changes the way we see the world. We become more suspicious, more cautious. We find it hard to trust others for fear of repeating past hurts. New relationships are affected by the shadow of the old one. We become overly protective to the point of unintentionally pushing good things away. Not only the mind, but the body is also affected. When we are constantly in a state of anger, the body releases stress responses. We easily suffer from insomnia, become irritable, and have difficulty concentrating. The small joys of life are no longer fully appreciated because the mind is constantly drawn back to an old story. Some say that holding on to resentment is a way to avoid forgetting lessons. But in reality, lessons can be learned without harboring resentment. We can learn from experience, we can set boundaries, but we don't need to carry negative emotions for too long. Lessons help us grow, while resentment only weighs us down. Many times we tell ourselves that we have the right to be angry. Yes, we do. But that right doesn't mean we have to hold on to that feeling forever. If an emotion causes us prolonged hurt, We can choose to let go for our own sake. Letting go isn't because the other person deserves forgiveness, but because we deserve peace. Imagine two paths. One is to continue harboring resentment. We walk with heavy hearts, each step bringing back memories of past pain. The other is to gradually learn to let go. It may be difficult at first, but each step will be lighter. The question is which path we want to take. The other person may never apologize. They may not realize their mistake. If we wait for an apology to be set free, we are putting the key to our happiness in someone else's hands. But if we decide to let go ourselves, we regain control of our lives. Forgiveness doesn't mean denying the hurt. It's acknowledging that what happened has happened, and we can't change it. But we can change how we react from now on. When we're no longer controlled by hatred, we begin to see things from a broader perspective. We see that people can make mistakes because of weakness, lack of understanding, or circumstances. This doesn't justify wrongdoing, but it helps ease the burden. When we understand that everyone has limitations, we find it easier to accept that hurt is a part of life's journey. We no longer see ourselves as perpetual victims, but as people capable of overcoming. Holding on to resentment traps us in the role of the victim. Letting go helps us break free from that role. We are no longer defined by what others have done to us. We're defined by how we get up and move on. Some people only realize years later that they wasted too much time on resentment. They missed opportunities for new connections, missed simple joys because their minds were always preoccupied with the past, and they finally understand they regret not letting go sooner. Of course, letting go isn't something that happens overnight. Some wounds take time to heal. But every time we choose not to let memories drag us down, we're taking a small step toward freedom. Every time we stop recounting the story with bitterness, we're lightening our hearts. Holding on to resentment hurts you more than it hurts others. The other person may have moved on while you remain stuck. But this being stuck isn't fate. You can choose to open the door and walk out. You can choose to focus on the present, on the people who cherish you, and on the goals ahead. When we do that, we realize that life is much bigger than a single pain. Hatred is only a small part of a long journey. If we don't let it take up all the space in our hearts, we will have room for love, for hope, for new beginnings. And then, we not only free ourselves from the past, but also give ourselves the opportunity to live more fully in the present. Nick Vujicic's story is a living testament to the power of forgiveness and extraordinary resilience. Born in Melbourne to a family of Serbian immigrants, Nick suffers from tetraamelia, a rare disorder that left him without both arms and legs. From the moment he was born, his life began with curious, pitying, and even prejudiced stares. Nick's childhood was far from easy. At school, he became the target of teasing and bullying. Children can be unintentionally cruel. They saw his differences and made fun of them. Those words, seemingly fleeting, left a deep mark on the mind of a boy yearning to be accepted like everyone else. There were times when Nick fell into despair. He felt like a burden to his family and wondered why he was born this way. At times, he didn't want to live anymore, thinking that the future would only bring suffering. The feeling of being excluded and ridiculed left his young heart deeply wounded. But it was during those dark days that another seed began to sprout. His family was always there to encourage him, reminding him that a person's worth doesn't lie in their outward appearance. Gradually, Nick understood that if he let the ridicule dictate his life, he would remain trapped in pain forever. The hardest thing wasn't facing other people's stares, but facing his own inner feelings. Nick realized he could hold on to resentment toward those who had hurt him, or he could choose a different path. He chose forgiveness. Forgiveness here doesn't mean denying the pain. He admits he was once sad, angry, and wanted to escape the world. But he understands that holding on to resentment only weighs down his soul. Those who mocked him may have forgotten their words, but if he continues to hold on, he will only keep hurting himself. When Nick decided to forgive, he began to feel lighter. He no longer saw himself as a victim of circumstances. Instead, he focused on what he could do. He learned to use his small foot to write, to type, to care for himself. Each new skill he acquired was a significant step forward in his journey to rediscover his self-worth. From a boy who once wanted to give up on life, Nick gradually became an inspiration to millions. He began sharing his story at schools, churches, and community events. He spoke about pain, self-doubt, moments of despair, but also about faith and hope. What's remarkable about his speeches is not only his resilience in overcoming his physical disability, but also the message of forgiveness. He shared that if he didn't forgive those who bullied him, he would never truly be free. Hatred only binds the soul, while forgiveness opens the door to liberation. Nick doesn't deny the fact that hurtful words can be deeply damaging, but he chooses to recognize that bullies may also be harboring their own insecurities. Instead of harboring anger, he chooses empathy. This shift in perspective helped him move beyond the role of victim. Later, as an international speaker, Nick traveled the world, inspiring students, young people, and those in crisis. He started a family, had children, and built a happy life. The image of a man without arms or legs, but always with a radiant smile, made many people reconsider the definition of happiness. If Nick had held on to resentment, he probably wouldn't have been able to stand before thousands of people with such peace. Forgiveness freed him from the control of the past. It allowed him to focus on his mission instead of on old wounds. Nick's story shows that sometimes what hurts us most isn't the circumstances, but how we react to them. He couldn't change the fact that he was born without arms and legs, but he could choose his attitude towards life, and choosing forgiveness was one of the most important decisions. Forgiveness doesn't change what happened in the schoolyard that year, but it changed the person he is today. It helped him see the world in a more positive light. It helped him become a source of motivation instead of a symbol of tragedy. Many people, upon hearing Nick's story, wondered why they, with healthy bodies and better circumstances, so easily succumbed to difficulties. The answer lies in inner strength. Forgiveness is a part of that strength. When we are no longer controlled by hatred, we have more energy to grow ourselves. Nick Fujisik's story reminds us that each of us has our own wounds. These may not be physical disabilities, but rather emotional traumas. We can choose to hold on to them as reasons to resent life, or transform them into motivation for growth. He was once ridiculed and bullied, but he chose forgiveness to free his soul from pain. Because of this, he not only changed his own life, but also touched the hearts of millions of others. Forgiveness didn't weaken him. On the contrary, it made him stronger than ever. And when we look at that journey, we understand that true freedom does not lie in a perfect body, but in a soul no longer bound by hatred. Forgiveness brings peace of mind. But when we let go of resentment, we have more energy for positive things. This is not just an encouraging saying, but a very real experience in everyone's spiritual life. When someone hurts us, the natural reaction is sadness and anger. These emotions appear as a self-protective mechanism. They remind us that something is wrong, that our boundaries have been violated. But if these emotions persist for too long, they cease to be protective and become a burden. Resentment is like a repetitive stream of thoughts in the head. We recall the event, remembering every word, every glance. Each time we relive it, negative emotions are stirred up. Mind, therefore, has no chance to rest. It is always in a state of alertness and tension. When our minds are heavy, everything around us seems darker. We find it hard to see the good things. We tend to overreact to small situations. We bring defensiveness into every relationship, even when the other person has no intention of hurting us. Forgiveness isn't an act of kindness directed at others first. It's a gift we give ourselves. When we decide to let go of resentment, we're telling ourselves that we deserve peace. We no longer want to waste so much energy on a past event. Many people fear forgiveness because they think it means accepting the other person's mistakes. But in reality, forgiveness and acceptance are two different things. We may disagree with their behavior, maintaining clear boundaries, but we don't continue to harbor resentment. When we let go, the mind begins to have space. Like a room being cleaned after a long period of clutter, we feel a sense of spaciousness. Positive thoughts have a greater chance to emerge. We are no longer occupied by fantasies of retaliation or dialogues in our heads. Mental energy is limited. If we use most of that energy to dwell on the person who hurt us, we'll be left with little for other important things. Work, family, dreams, personal hobbies all require focus and enthusiasm. When our minds are at ease, we can invest more fully in them. Forgiveness also helps improve the quality of existing relationships. When we no longer carry suspicion and bitterness, we are more likely to trust. We listen to others with an open mind. We don't rush to conclusions or become overly defensive. As a result, the connection becomes more genuine and profound. Some people only realize they've missed so many opportunities after years of holding on to resentment. They missed valuable conversations and reconciliations that could have happened sooner. When they finally decide to let go, they feel like a huge weight has been lifted off their shoulders. Letting go isn't forgetting. The memories are still there, but the emotions have subsided. We can recall the event without feeling our hearts ache. We see it as a lesson instead of a bleeding wound. When the mind is at ease, the body benefits as well. We sleep better because we no longer have wandering thoughts. We're less stressed and less irritable. This inner peace reflects outwardly through our eyes and speech. Those around us also sense this change. Forgiveness also opens up opportunities for creativity and growth. When no longer bound by the past, we dare to try new things. We are not overly afraid of failure because we understand that mistakes are part of the journey. A free mind will be more flexible and proactive in seeking solutions. Sometimes we think that holding on to resentment is a way to protect ourselves from being hurt again. But in reality, it is resentment that makes us closed off and isolated. Forgiveness helps us open doors not to be easily hurt, but to live more fully. The process of forgiveness may be slow. We may have to go through many emotional ups and downs before truly letting go. But every small step counts. Each time we choose not to bring up the bitter past, we are getting closer to relief. When we let go of resentment, we have more energy for positive things. We can spend time learning a new skill, taking better care of ourselves, and caring for those we love. Instead of letting the past take over, we invest in the future. Life is already full of challenges. If we add the burden of lingering resentment, we only make the journey more difficult. Forgiveness doesn't make the past disappear, but it makes the present easier to bear. Waking up each morning with a light mind is a gift. When we are no longer haunted by the past, we can better appreciate the beauty of the present. A warm cup of tea, a pleasant conversation, small success, all become more meaningful when the soul is not clouded by resentment. Forgiveness brings peace of mind. It's a quiet but profound liberation. When we let go of resentment, we not only free ourselves from the past, but also give ourselves the opportunity to live more positively each day. And in that peace, we find new energy to love, to build, and to move forward with unwavering faith. Not everyone deserves forgiveness, but you deserve peace of mind. This is a truth that might make many people think for a long time, because until now, when we talk about forgiveness, we are often taught to be generous, to be tolerant, to be open-hearted to everyone. But the reality of life is much more complicated. There are wounds that are too deep. There are repetitive behaviors. There are people who have never admitted their mistakes, never regretted them. In those cases, saying they deserve forgiveness can feel unfair. And we have every right to feel that way. Forgiveness is not a reward for the person who caused the hurt. Forgiveness is an inner choice you make. When you understand this, you no longer question whether the other person deserves it. You begin to ask yourself if you want to continue carrying that burden. Many people confuse forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is letting go of resentment. Reconciliation is restoring the relationship. These two things don't necessarily have to go together. You can forgive without going back to how things were before. You can let go of hatred but still maintain a safe distance. There are people who have hurt us deeply. They may have betrayed our trust. They may have taken advantage of our kindness. They may have intentionally caused us pain. In such cases, continuing the relationship may no longer be appropriate, and that is perfectly understandable. But if we hold on to resentment, the one who suffers the most is still us. They can move on with their lives while we remain stuck with old thoughts. Every time we remember, negative emotions return. Our peace is thus eroded, little by little. You deserve inner peace. Peace doesn't come from others apologizing. It doesn't depend on whether justice is perfectly served. Peace begins when you decide not to let the past control your present emotions. Forgiveness doesn't mean denying the pain. You have the right to acknowledge that you were hurt. You have the right to say that it was wrong. But after acknowledging it, you can choose not to continue harboring negative feelings. Some people hold on to resentment as a way to protect themselves. They think that if they remain angry, they won't be deceived again. But in reality, Vigilance doesn't need to be accompanied by resentment. You can learn a lesson, set clear boundaries, without carrying bitterness. Peace is when you recall a painful event and your heart no longer aches as it did before. Peace is when you think about the person who hurt you and no longer want to retaliate. Peace is when you can focus on the present without being dragged back to the past. Not everyone deserves forgiveness in the sense of being welcomed with open arms. But you deserve to sleep soundly without being disturbed by old thoughts. You deserve to laugh without having to hide your anger. Forgiveness is an act of self-liberation. When you let go of resentment, you're not saying that what happened was right. You're simply saying that you don't want to continue hurting yourself because of it. You're handing over responsibility for the wrongdoing to the person who caused it, instead of continuing to carry it in your heart. Some people only realize after many years that they have let hatred take up too much of their space. They miss new opportunities because of constant doubt. They build walls that make it difficult for others to approach them. So when they finally let go, they find life much lighter. Forgiveness isn't a one-time decision. You might have to remind yourself many times. There will be days when the memories come back stronger. But each time you choose not to dwell on them, you're getting closer to inner freedom. You don't need to prove your nobility to anyone. Forgiveness isn't about receiving praise. It's about living a more peaceful life. When you prioritize your peace of mind, you begin to make healthier choices in life. The other person may not change. They may continue to live the same way. But that no longer determines your mood. You are no longer giving them control over your emotions. Retain that control for yourself. When your mind is at peace, you have more energy for good things. You invest in relationships that value you. You dedicate time to your dreams and personal growth. You no longer waste time on imaginary conversations in your head. Not everyone deserves forgiveness in the way they desire, but you deserve inner peace in the way you choose. Forgiveness doesn't weaken you. On the contrary, it shows you're strong enough not to be controlled by the past. Life inevitably involves hurt, but how you react to hurt determines the quality of your life. When you choose to let go of resentment, you choose freedom. When you choose peace, you choose to love yourself more. And ultimately, the most important thing isn't whether the other person receives your forgiveness. What matters is whether you find peace within your own heart. Because in a world full of turmoil, inner peace is the most precious asset you can possess. Forgiveness is an inner journey. Sometimes it takes time to accept and heal. Not all wounds can heal in a day. Not all hurt can be soothed by just a few words. Forgiveness is not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It's a silent process that takes place within the soul. When we are hurt, the first thing we feel is pain. That pain can come from words, actions, betrayal, or indifference. Everyone has a different tolerance level. Some people get over it quickly. Others need a long time to understand what really happened. Forgiveness doesn't begin by saying everything is okay. It begins with being honest with your feelings. You have to acknowledge that you're sad, angry, and disappointed. If you try to force yourself to forgive too soon, those unprocessed emotions will continue to fester inside. The inner journey requires courage. Courage to look back at painful memories. Courage to question why they hurt us so deeply. Courage to realize that part of the pain may stem from our own expectations. Some people think that forgiveness means forgetting. But in reality, forgetting isn't always possible. Memories can't be erased at will. Forgiveness is when the memory remains, but the accompanying emotions have changed. We can remember without being overwhelmed by the pain anymore. Time plays a crucial role in this process. It's not because time heals all wounds, but because over time, we have the opportunity to see things from more perspectives. Distance helps us calm down. Calmness helps us think more clearly. There are days when we feel like we've let go, but then some situation brings the memories back with great force. That doesn't mean we failed, just shows that the healing process isn't complete. The inner journey doesn't follow a straight line. It is steps forward and steps back. Forgiveness also requires understanding our boundaries. Healing doesn't mean accepting every wrongdoing. We can let go of resentment but still decide not to return to the old relationship. Forgiveness is about releasing negative emotions, not erasing clarity. Along that journey, there are times when we need support, a friend to listen, an inspiring book, a moment of quiet reflection. Forgiveness is a personal story, but that doesn't mean we have to go it alone. When we begin to accept what has happened, we realize that life is not perfect. People can make mistakes, we ourselves have unintentionally hurt others. This understanding doesn't diminish our responsibility, but it helps us see things from a more humane perspective. Acceptance is not surrender. It is acknowledging the reality that the past has happened and we cannot change it. When we stop struggling with what cannot be changed, we have more energy for the present. It is a crucial step in the healing process. Some people take years to truly forgive. You need to go through the stages of anger and sadness before reaching peace. Each stage is meaningful. Don't rush to shorten the journey just because you feel pressured to appear strong. Forgiveness is an inner journey because it happens in silence. Outsiders may not notice the change. But inside, we feel lighter. Thoughts no longer revolve around the past. The heart is no longer as heavy as before. Healing is when you can mention the person who hurt you without trembling. It's when you no longer want to prove anything to them. It's when you understand that your value doesn't depend on how they treat you. Sometimes the hardest part is forgiving ourselves. We blame ourselves for trusting, for not recognizing the signs sooner. But if we don't learn to be forgiving of ourselves, the healing journey will be incomplete. We also deserve to be understood and empathized with. Forgiveness doesn't erase the lesson. On the contrary, it makes the lesson clearer. When we are no longer blinded by negative emotions, we see what we need to change, what we need to preserve. We grow from the experience instead of being trapped in it. The inner journey may be long, but each step counts. Every time we choose not to let hatred control us, we are getting closer to freedom. Every time we choose to think more positively about the future, we are strengthening our healing. Forgiveness is not the ultimate goal. It is a state we achieve after experiencing many different emotions. At that point, we no longer carry an invisible burden. We walk more lightly, with greater confidence. Life will present new challenges. But having gone through the journey of forgiveness once, we understand that we are capable of overcoming them. We believe in our inner strength more. We are no longer afraid of being hurt as before because we know that we can heal. Forgiveness is an inner journey. Sometimes it takes time to accept and heal. But when we are patient with ourselves, when we give our hearts enough time to calm down, peace will gradually emerge. And in that peace, we find a more mature and stronger version of ourselves. There was a son who spent many years living with the feeling of lacking his father's affection. From a young age, he always saw his father as a strict, taciturn man who almost never expressed love in words, while his friends received hugs, praise, and weekend outings from their fathers. He only remembered silent evenings and dry reprimands. Growing up without affectionate gestures, a void gradually formed in his heart. He wondered why his father was so cold. Why did he never ask him if he was sad or tired? Every time he saw his father, he felt no warmth, only distance. Throughout his youth, he carried that resentment. He felt his father hadn't fulfilled the role of a true father. He believed he deserved more attention. Their conversations were often brief and heavy. Neither spoke their true feelings, but both sensed the distance between them. As he grew older, he left home to study and then work. The geographical distance further strained their relationship. He rarely called home, and each time he did, it was just a few polite questions. Deep down, he still carried the unresolved feeling of hurt. But life has a way of changing people's perspectives. Once, during a visit home after many busy years, he happened to overhear his mother recounting the difficult years of his childhood. Back then, the family was poor, and his father had to work from early morning until late at night. He did all kinds of jobs, from manual labor to taking on extra work, just to ensure his son could get a proper education. My mother recounted that there were nights when my father came home with scratched hands and an exhausted body, yet he would quietly sit and repair my bicycle. There were times he refused to buy himself new clothes so he could save the money for my tuition. He didn't talk much, wasn't good at expressing his emotions, but every action he took was for his family. Hearing that, the son fell silent. Old memories suddenly resurfaced in a different light. He recalled the image of his father sitting quietly in the corner of the house, his shoulders slumped after a long day. At the time, he only thought his father was indifferent. Now he understood it was the wariness of a man burdened with too much responsibility. He began to realize that his father was just a human being. He grew up in poverty, not taught how to express his feelings. He loved in his own way, quietly and sparingly. What he had once considered cold might just have been awkwardness. That understanding didn't come in a single moment. It was the result of many days of reflection. He looked back on his childhood not just with the emotions of a once sad child, but with the maturity of a man who had experienced the pressures of life. One evening, when only the two of them were home, he decided to start a real conversation. He talked about the years he had felt emotionally deprived. He said there were times when he resented his father deeply. His voice trembled slightly, not from anger, but from emotion. The father was silent for a long time. Then he slowly said that he had never known how to express love in words. He thought that simply providing food and clothing was enough to fulfill his duty. He didn't realize that his son needed more than that. In that moment, both of them felt tears welling up in their eyes. There were no formal apologies, no flowery words, but the honesty had broken the thick ice between them. The son realized that if he continued to hold a grudge, he would forever see his father through the lens of the past. But when he chose forgiveness, he opened up an opportunity to understand his father in the present. Forgiveness here is not about denying the sadness of childhood. It is about accepting that his father also had his own sufferings that he could not understand back then. Understanding eased the knots in his heart, began calling home more often. The conversations gradually became longer, although his father remained a man of few words. He sensed his father's concern through small questions about his work and health. He also learned to express his feelings more openly. Simple words of thanks and well wishes became a bridge between them. He didn't wait for his father to change completely, simply appreciated each small step in the healing process. Forgiving his father was a profound inner journey. It freed him from feelings of abandonment. It helped him view his childhood not just through sadness, but with empathy. He understood that each generation has a different way of showing love. That story reminds us that sometimes the people who hurt us don't do so because they don't love us, but because they don't know how to love in the way we want them to. When we are mature enough to put ourselves in their shoes, we can see things that were previously hidden. Not every relationship has a chance of being mended. But as long as there is still the ability to talk, to listen, understanding can open new paths. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it changes the present and the future. The son finally realized that what he had been searching for all these years wasn't a perfect apology, but connection. When he chose to forgive, he gave himself the chance to rebuild his relationship with his father in a more mature way. Understanding untangled the knots in his heart. From reproach, he became grateful. From distance, he became close. Forgiveness didn't weaken him. On the contrary, it made him stronger because he dared to confront his true feelings. The story of the son forgiving his father shows that love is sometimes obscured by silence and misunderstanding. But when there is understanding, years of separation can be healed. And in that healing, both find the peace they had unknowingly lost for so long. There are wounds in life that leave no scars on the skin, but are etched deep in memory. It could be a hurtful word, a betrayal, a misunderstanding, or simply the feeling of being abandoned. Every time we remember it, our hearts ache as if it happened yesterday. We wish we could turn back time to fix everything. But time never turns back. The past remains unchanging. When you forgive, you don't change the past. What happened still happened. Those words were still spoken. Those actions still hurt. Forgiveness is not denying the truth, or is it pretending that things never happened? Forgiveness is not erasing memories, but when you forgive, you change your own future. Many people think that forgiveness is for the sake of others, that when we forgive, we are doing good for the person who hurt us. In reality, forgiveness is first and foremost a gift to ourselves, because when we hold on to resentment, the first person to be bound is ourselves. Hatred is like an invisible thread. Every time we recall the pain with anger, we tighten that thread around our hearts. The other person may have moved on. They may have forgotten. They may be living a new life. We remain trapped in the old moment, repeating it over and over in our minds. There was a woman who was betrayed by her best friend at work. She lost opportunities for promotion because of false rumors. For years, every time she thought of that friend, she felt angry. She told herself she would never forgive. She believed that if she did, she would become weak. But it was that very anger that exhausted her, made it difficult for her to trust others, made her suspicious of every new relationship. She didn't realize that her old friend had only hurt her once, while she had hurt herself hundreds of times more by living in resentment. One day, she decided to write down all her feelings. She didn't send the letter to anyone. She wrote it simply to confront her pain. And then she realized that what was causing her the most suffering wasn't the betrayal from the past, but the fact that she had let it control her current life. She chose to forgive, not because the other person deserved it, not because things had become right, but because she deserved peace. Since letting go of her resentment, she began to feel more at ease. She was no longer haunted by the mention of his old name. She opened up more to her new colleagues. The change didn't happen overnight, but little by little, her future became brighter. Forgiveness doesn't change the past. The past remains a part of our life story. But forgiveness changes how we carry that story forward. There are people who live their entire lives in the shadow of the past. They recount their pain as proof that the world has treated them unfairly, and perhaps that is true. But if they don't let go, the past will continue to shape their future. When we forgive, we regain control of our lives. We tell ourselves that what happened no longer controls our emotions. We couldn't choose what happened, but we can choose how we react from now on. Forgiveness is also a journey of growth. When we are young, we often see things through a black and white lens. Anyone who hurts us is bad. Anyone who disappoints us is not worthy of respect. But as we gain more experience, we understand that people are more complex than that. Often, the person who hurts us also carries other wounds within themselves. That doesn't justify their actions. But understanding helps us feel less burdened. You realize that holding on to resentment doesn't make us stronger. It only makes us rigid and withdrawn. There was a man who was treated so harshly by his father that he felt pressured throughout his childhood. He grew up feeling never good enough. He blamed his father for his low self-esteem. For years, he avoided any deep conversations. It wasn't until he became a father that he truly understood the difficulties of being a parent. He realized that his own father may have made mistakes, but he had also tried his best within his understanding. When he chose to forgive, he didn't deny the pain of his childhood. But he refused to let it continue to dominate how he was a father. He changed his children's future by not repeating the things that hurt him. Forgiveness, therefore, not only changes the future of one person, but can change the future of generations to come. Many people fear forgiveness because they think it means accepting things continue as they were. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to a toxic relationship. Forgiveness doesn't mean crossing your boundaries. You can forgive and still choose to leave. You can forgive and still protect yourself. Forgiveness is an internal decision. It happens within you, regardless of whether the other person apologizes or not. There are people who never admit their mistakes. If we wait for them to change before forgiving them, we might have to wait a lifetime. When you forgive, you end that waiting. You are no longer dependent on the actions of others for your peace. You give yourself the right to move on. There may be times when old memories resurface. There may be times when you still feel the pain. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing not to harbor anger each time that memory comes up. Your future is built from small choices like these. Every time you choose to let go instead of clinging to resentment, you're laying a brick for a lighter life. Life is too short to spend so much energy on things you can't change. You can't undo yesterday's words. Can't erase an action that has already happened. But you can decide that your tomorrow won't be overshadowed by yesterday's darkness. When you forgive, you open up space for positive things. You have more room for joy, for trust, for new relationships. You no longer carry that invisible burden on your shoulders. Forgiveness is not an act of weakness. It requires courage. Courage to face the pain. Courage to acknowledge that you have been hurt. And courage to say that you deserve a better future than the past. When you forgive, you don't change the past. But you change how the past affects you. You change the path forward. You are no longer a victim of the old story, but become the one writing the new one. And in that new story, you can choose peace over hatred. You can choose growth over being trapped. You can choose love over closing your heart. The past is gone. The future is yet to come. Forgiveness is the bridge between those two shores. When you step onto that bridge, you don't turn back to fix what happened. You move forward, carrying with you relief and hope. That is the quiet but profound power of forgiveness. In life, people often think that freedom is about winning. Winning an argument, winning at work, winning a relationship, or simply proving themselves right and the other person wrong. We believe that when victory is ours, we feel relieved and triumphant. But in reality, that's not always the case. There are victories that bring fleeting joy, yet leave an emptiness in the heart afterward. There are times when we fight to the bitter end, defending our ego to the very end, but in the end, we still feel exhausted. Because true freedom doesn't come from winning or losing. It comes from letting go of resentment and moving on lightly. Winning and losing are often linked to ego. When someone hurts us, we want to prove we're not wrong. When misunderstood, we want to explain ourselves thoroughly to regain justice. That's not wrong. People need to be respected and recognized. But if we cling to the feeling of having to win at all costs, we inadvertently bind ourselves to that very situation. Imagine two friends having a conflict. Both believe they are right. Both wait for the other to apologize first. The silent battle drags on. Each thinks that if they take the initiative to make peace, they will lose. But throughout that time, who is truly free? Neither. Both are trapped in their pride and resentment. Freedom isn't about the other person admitting they were wrong. Freedom is about no longer letting that story control your mood every day. Resentment is like a stone we carry in our pocket. At first, it may be small, but the longer we hold on to it, the heavier it becomes. We may become so accustomed to its weight that we don't even realize we're getting tired. But every time we recall the past, the stone reminds us that we haven't let go yet. Many people think that holding on to resentment is a way to protect themselves. They fear that if they forgive, they will be looked down upon. They fear that if they let go, the other person will think they are weak. But in reality, the person most affected by resentment is the one who carries it in their heart. There was a man who was betrayed by a business partner. He lost a large sum of money and his trust in others. For years, he recounted the story with bitterness. He said he would never forget it. He said that if he ever met him again, he wouldn't let him get away with it. But what he didn't realize was that all that time he lived in suspicion and tension, found it difficult to open up and cooperate with new people, was overly controlling, fearing being deceived again. It was resentment that limited his life. One day, after going through many ups and downs, he realized that his ex might have moved on long ago. Only he remained frozen in the moment of betrayal. He began to understand that holding on to anger wouldn't get him back the money, nor would it change the past. It would only take away his present peace. When he decided to let go, not because the other person deserved it, but because he wanted to live a lighter life, he felt like a weight had been lifted. He no longer spoke of the past with resentment. He viewed it as a lesson. From then on, he was more cautious, but not withdrawn. He was stronger, but not bitter. That is freedom. Freedom is not about being superior to others. Freedom is about no longer being bound by negative feelings towards them. In many family relationships, the desire to win easily leads to hurt feelings. Some siblings quarrel over property. Some fathers and sons stop speaking to each other because of a harsh word spoken in anger. Each believes they are right. Each maintains their position. But as the years pass, what remains is not the feeling of victory, but distance. Letting go of resentment doesn't mean denying the pain. It's acknowledging that what happened has happened and that you can't change it. But you can change how you live your life. Some people only realize at the end of their lives that what matters isn't who's right or wrong, but how much precious time they've wasted because of their stubbornness. True freedom is when you can recall a past event without your heart aching. It's when you can hear the name of someone who once hurt you without your emotions surging. It's when you no longer want to prove anything to them. To reach that state requires a great deal of courage. Letting go isn't easy, especially when you've invested so much emotion into it. But the longer you hold on, the more exhausted you become. Someone asked, if we let go, where is the justice? The answer is that letting go doesn't erase justice. The law of cause and effect in life doesn't depend on our resentment. Others will take responsibility for their actions in their own way. Our responsibility is to take care of our own souls. When we move forward gently, we don't carry the past as a burden. We learn lessons, but we don't carry bitterness. We remember, but the pain is no longer as intense as before. Life is full of things beyond our control. There will be times when we are misunderstood. There will be times when we are hurt. There will be times when we are at a disadvantage. If we cling to resentment every time this happens, our hearts will have no room for joy. Freedom doesn't lie in proving oneself superior. Freedom lies in being able to leave a fight without winning. Choose peace over ego. Moving on gently doesn't mean forgetting everything. It means not letting the past determine the future. It means not letting someone else's mistake define our own value. When we let go of resentment, we open up space for new relationships, new opportunities, and new joys. We no longer view the world through a lens of suspicion and defensiveness. We live with greater openness. True freedom is an inner state. It doesn't depend on whether we receive an apology or not. It doesn't depend on whether the other person admits their mistake or not. You may not be able to change how others treated you in the past, but you can change how you treat yourself in the present. You can choose not to continue hurting yourself by dwelling on old wounds every day. Ultimately, life isn't a scorecard recording who wins and who loses. It's a journey of growth. And on that journey, those who know how to let go are often the ones who go the furthest. True freedom doesn't come from winning or losing. It comes from letting go of resentment and moving on gently. When you do that, you not only free yourself from an old story, but you also give yourself the opportunity to live a more open, peaceful, and fulfilling life. In life, everyone has at least once harbored resentment. Perhaps it was an unintentional hurtful word. Perhaps it was a betrayal that shattered trust. Or maybe it was just a misunderstanding left unresolved. Initially, we think we're holding on to those feelings to protect ourselves, tell ourselves we mustn't forget, we mustn't be soft-hearted. But over time, that very resentment silently binds us. Whenever old memories resurface, negative emotions resurface, we suddenly become heavy-hearted, irritable, and even lose our usual composure. While the other person may have moved on, we remain stuck in the past. We don't realize that we are giving control of our mood to an old story. Resentment is like an invisible rope. The tighter you hold on to it, the harder it is to move. It affects how we see others, how we build new relationships, and even our mental health. We may smile on the outside, but inside, there's still a corner that hasn't healed. Forgiveness isn't about saying what someone else did was right, nor does it mean going back to how things were before. Forgiveness is an internal decision. It's about choosing not to let the past continue to control the present. It's about accepting that what happened has happened and that we can't change it. But we can change how we live our lives. When we let go of resentment, we don't do it because others deserve it. We do it because we ourselves deserve peace. Peace doesn't come from winning or losing, nor from proving who is right or wrong. Peace comes when we feel our hearts lighten. When recalling past events no longer brings a pang of pain, letting go is a journey. You may not be able to do it today. It may still be hurting. But just the thought of letting go is a step forward. Every time you choose not to nurture your anger, you are gradually untying the chains binding you. If you still harbor resentment today, try to think about how it's binding you. Forgiveness isn't for the sake of others, but for your own peace of mind. If you believe that letting go is the path to liberation, please share this video and leave your thoughts. Perhaps your story will give someone the courage to begin their own healing journey.